This is Ken Hance, best storyteller in Texas. I hope you enjoy part 2 of my interview with Governor Rick Perry. Let me ask you a little about when you graduated from A&M. You had a military obligation, and you went in as a pilot, and you flew C-130s, right?
All around the globe.
How did you wind up flying C-130s?
Yeah. Paint Creek boy who had never left the state of Texas, but probably less than a half a dozen times, and that was just to Colorado in August because my daddy liked to go there when it was hot in August and we had the cotton crop laid by. I never went anywhere. New York and Philadelphia in 1964 at the National Jamboree. Other than that, I can't tell you.
You were an Eagle Scout.
I was. And in 1964, we went to New York City and saw the World's Fair and went downtown. I saw Times Square, and man, I said, I've seen it all. But other than that, I didn't go anywhere. And I become a tactical airlifter flying C-130s out of Dyess Air Force Base, but we were a rotational squadron. So I lived in RAF Mildenhall, which is in East Anglia, up north and east of London, and in Rhein-Main Air Force Base, which was in Frankfurt, Germany. We would rotate between those two and fly all over the European theater. I spent the summer in 1976 in Saudi Arabia. I mean, getting to see things that I couldn't even dream of that I would have been able to see as a boy back in Paint Creek, Texas. I mean, it was just like, looking back on it now, it truly was a dream come true. And that, again, I give my dad the credit for instilling in me that public service, and you can, listen, public service comes in a lot of different forms, fashion. Find the place you can volunteer for. You may want to join the Peace Corps, or you may want to join the Marine Corps, or anything in between. But find that place in life that you can give back, because you're going to get a lot more than you're going to be given.
Absolutely. The one of the things that I want, and you may not be able to get into this, but did you ever transport any individuals that were unusual or anything? Can you talk about those things?
Our government's always involved with a lot of interesting situations. Let's just say, when you think back in the early 1970s, my squadron was flying Class B explosives. That's all you knew. There was something in the back of your airplane that would, had the potential to be dangerous, from bullets to bombs. You didn't know because they were all packaged up, but you briefed differently on it. The squadron was flying down in Chile in, I think, 1973. I wasn't in the squadron. I came in early 74. I think this is correct year. But anyway, it was when Pinochet overthrew Allende, and our government in Chile, our government was flying ammunition to the Chilean military, and then the next thing you know, there's an overthrow of the government. The time I saw it real time, I going to school at Texas A&M in the 1960s and early 1970s, you never saw any people protesting. It was just, you just didn't see that. Austin, they had their protests against the war and whatever. You didn't see that at Texas A&M. I never saw an anti-American protest until 1975. And I'm sitting waiting for an early morning crew bus to pick us up in Suda Bay, which is an island that Crete owns and that the Greeks operate.
You were in Greece.
I'm flying in the European theater. We'd been flying Class B explosives again to Turkey, landing in Greece to refuel, and we'd spent the night in Suda Bay, which is a Navy base that we operate there. And these guys drove by in a pickup truck, and this is pretty early morning, and they're giving us the high sign, and talking broken English where you could hear
trash that you could understand.
That I could understand. They were talking about us not being good people. and using some words that I knew exactly what they were saying. I just didn't know why they were saying it. So I thought that was kind of odd. And you dirty American SOBs, and I was kind of like, well, darn. I got back to England a day or two later, picked up the Stars and Stripes, which is our military magazine, newspaper, and on the front page there is a war going on between the Greeks and the Turks. The Greeks and Turks have been fighting each other for some time over the Aegean Sea or something. Yeah, a long time. And we were flying bullets and bombs to the Turks, landing in Greece and refueling. And I was kind of like, oh, okay, I understand why they were mad now.
Yeah. Well,
anyway, our government, God bless them, they seem to be able to meddle in a lot of people's business.
And sometimes it works out, and a lot of times it doesn't.
Sometimes it doesn't. It's a burden we have. One of the things that I've learned in my many years of public service now is we should let people figure out how they want to live their lives. I will tell you, the war in Afghanistan is a great example of it, Kent. I'm a little bit of a historian. I understand history and how it repeats itself. Afghanistan has never been conquered, the best I can tell. You go back 2,000 years, Alexander the Great high-centered in that country. He was not successful. The Great, the Raj, the British Empire, they failed miserably there. Russia, the great Russian Empire, has been defeated once in its history, and it was in Afghanistan. Why we thought we were going to have a different outcome is beyond me. When you think about the cost, when you think about both in literally trillions of dollars, the cost of young American lives from 2003 when the war on terror started until 2010, I wrote a letter a week to a Texas family who lost a loved one in the war on terror. One a week. I know the cost of these types of wars, and I hope that the future leadership of our country recognizes that you're not ever going to make a democracy out of Afghanistan. Sorry, I mean you go stay over there from now until Jesus comes back, and it ain't gonna happen. But being thoughtful about how we engage, there are places that we can hopefully help people, and that they like America. But the 20 years that we spent over there in that part of the world, I'm pretty sure they don't like us any better. Matter of fact, they may like us less. If you need to go in there and get rid of some bad guys, just hire it done.
Yeah, get it over with.
Just hire it done. I mean, there's if I suggest if we had spent $50 million a year with the Northern Alliance and saying, hey, we need these guys over here to keep them in those caves, and if they come out, kill them. I can do the math on that pretty good. I'm an animal science major, but in 20 years at $50 million a year, that's a lot cheaper than $1 trillion.
Absolutely, big time cheaper.
Yeah.
What as you got out of the military, you started and went back to farm with your dad, run cattle, things like that, and then you got an interest in politics.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how it happened. If you look back on your life, if you're a faithful person, you can see God kind of putting up some roadblocks or removing some hurdles and kind of guiding you through life. And boy, he sure did with me. I came home, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do, Kent. I knew, military wasn't where I wanted. I'd done my part, went and served. The Vietnam War was over with, and I kind of, as Dad said, go do your part and then come home. And I did, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was kind of lost as a goose in a snowstorm. I mean, anyway, it quit raining. As you know, you represented that part of the state from time to time in your political career.
It turned the faucet off.
It will quit raining. And in the spring of 1977, it quit raining. And it didn't rain again for a spell. We didn't have a cotton crop that year. We didn't put a wheat crop in the fall of 77. The spring of 78, it hadn't rained. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I love you, but I got to go do something to try to make a living. And he said, well, you need to go do what you want to do. And so I applied to go fly for Southwest Airlines.
Really?
Yes, sir. I had a class date in September to start flying for Southwest. And I was an ideal person for them. I'd been trained by the military. I had, a couple thousand hours of flying time. I was 27, 28 years old. They had a long runway in front of me for to be a productive pilot. And anyway, I was all set, and August the 5th of 1978, it rained 30 inches in 24 hours. And I mean, that was probably at least a 100-year flood, if not a 500-year flood in our part of the world. And I took that as God saying, okay, this is where I want you to stay. And I never showed up, and would have probably had a very different trajectory in life had I gone to Dallas and become a Southwest Airlines pilot. But I didn't. So anyway, I stayed there and farmed and ranched with Dad and became his partner. My dad became my best friend. We had a few rocky months there as I was transitioning from being a captain in the Air Force, and he thought I was still that dummy that had left 10 years before. And I was like, I'd been to college, and he hadn't even been to college. I mean, what does he know, right?
Yeah.
Over about a year period of time, in his eyes, I matured, and he got a whole bunch smarter for me. So, but we had just a great relationship.
Then you offered yourself up for public service. Your dad had been a county commissioner. He served 28 years as county commissioner, and you decided to run for state representative.
And Kent, this kind of I'm tracking your political career in this sense. I never met a Republican or anybody that would admit to be one out in Haskell County. There were a few people that you kind of looked at. Now, with that said, Eisenhower carried Haskell County because all the the vets from World War II, they liked Eisenhower and voted for him. But other than that, it was conservative Democrat country.
Right.
So I ran for I got bored in the late 70s. As a matter of fact, one of the first political campaigns I worked for was the same time you got elected to the state house, or excuse me, to Congress, was in 78. Charlie Stenholm was a farmer from out in Eriksdal, which is where we ginned, and I worked for and helped him get elected. Went to the state convention and I that was interesting. I liked that. I enjoyed it. So I started paying attention to the political world and going to precinct conventions and county conventions and state conventions and helping guys. And 1983, I got approached about running for the state house, and took the plunge. And
who was your state representative at the time? Was it Joe Hanna?
Joe Hanna. Great American.
Really a true patriot.
Just a wonderful man, Joe Hanna. And Joe retired, and some guys, matter of fact, Bill Longley, who worked for Charles Stenholm.
Big Bill.
Big Bill. Lions Club Bill. He came, well, actually, I went into town to coffee shop, and he came over and said, hey, you going to run for that state rep seat? And I was like, gosh, no, I've never run against Joe Hanna. He said, well, Joe announced 30 days ago. I didn't go to town much those days. He said, Joe announced 30 days ago that he wasn't going to seek re-election. And this was like 3 days before the filing deadline. And he said, you need to think about it. So I drive back to Haskell. Nita's loading up to take Griffin, who had just been born, with her mom and dad to Ruidoso. They were going to go up there for a few days. And I said, what do you think about this? And she said, well, why don't you just do what you want to do? You're going to do what you want to do anyway. And she said, I'm going to be for you.
That's good. That's a good attitude.
She was a good girl.
And she went to Ruidoso, and you stayed there and filed
for the State House. And I think that was a May. Matter of fact, it was May the 5th was the general election. The reason I know that is my wife's birthday, Cinco de Mayo. And we won without a runoff. We had two opponents, and anyway, that started me going to the State House in
who was speaker?
1985. Gib Lewis.
Gib Lewis.
Golly, I love Gib Lewis. He was so good to us. There were a bunch of us boys came in and gals. Lena Guerrero was in our class. Yeah. It was a really fascinating class. Dan Morales was in that class, and Dr. Mike McKinney, Cliff Johnson, Rick Williamson. I mean, some just really kind of new type of legislators, people that were really just hardworking, smart, and
a lot of depth.
Yeah, there were 30.
To look and say, what do we do about this problem?
Yeah, there were 32 of us in that class, as my memory serves me, which was a really big class coming in, and Gib allowed them to have some influence that second termers in particular. He watched us in our freshman year,
right,
and he put 9 of us on appropriations. So a second termer being on appropriations was almost unheard of in those days, and he put 9 of us on there. And if you'll recall, we had a group called the Pit Bulls. And we were always trying to cut everything. We were asking hard questions and cutting the budget.
Yeah, you asked some questions. That group, they got some questions that others didn't. Jim Rudd was in
chairman. He was the chairman of the Appropriations Committee. Yeah, from Level Land.
Brownfield.
Brownfield. Excuse me, Brownfield, not Level Land. Brownfield. Yes, sir.
And then you decided in 90 to run for Ag Commissioner.
Yeah, I'd figured out that from my personal life, I was spending a lot of time down here. If you'll recall, 1986, we were broke. Governor Clements was in here, and we were out of money. We had to cut the budget something fierce, and we had like 4 special sessions after the regular session. The State House was in session more than the United States Congress during that period of time. And man, I was going a lot. Sidney Perry was born the summer of 1986 while I was home for her birth, but I started seeing some real clear evidence that I needed to go figure out how to do something else. That it was of great interest to me. It was stimulating. I really enjoyed it. But kind of the bottom line was, for my family, it was not in their best interest. And I don't even remember. I want to say Karl Rove approached me about running for Ag Commissioner. And, at that same time, I was going through the thought process of switching political parties. And I did that, I think, August of 89. I stepped out on the front steps of the state capitol with Phil Graham, and I made both political parties really happy. When I left the Democrat Party, they were kind of patted me on the back and said,
"Get rid of you." The Republicans glad to have me.
So, and for me, and I hope for the Republican Party, I'll be a little bit partisan here, that it turned out well for for both groups.
Well, and Fred,
Fred Meyer.
Fred Meyer,
Yeah.
Chairman, one of the nicest
Yeah.
persons I've ever known,
Yeah.
and was a real patriot. He was trying to do what he thought was best for the country and best for the state.
There are good folks on both sides of the aisle. I don't and one of the things I still love about my home state more than any other place, and having been to Washington D.C. now, I really appreciate it. Is Democrats and Republicans can work together. Now we get up and strongly disagree about policy issues, but when it's over with,
it wasn't personal.
No, and I'll give you a great example. One of the most liberal members of the state house, still there today. I'm pretty sure outside of Craddock, she's the second highest longest tenured member of the state house, and that's Sinfronia Thompson. Sinfronia is a inner city Houston lawyer, African American, and politically we don't have a lot in common, but she and I respect each other as well as anybody that I ever served with. We became really good friends. And subsequently, when I was governor, we worked on some things together. We passed some legislation on child sexual trafficking that was very influential. And I get it about the things that both sides of the aisle have to do to kind of make the base happy from time to time. But at the end of the day, in the state of Texas, we still can get along and not just personally try to destroy everybody. Washington, D.C., whew, I'm telling you, Kent, you were serving up there, and I think some of the halcyon days of being in the State House. Ronald Reagan was there, who was a happy warrior, and whether you agreed with his politics or not, you liked the man.
He was a good person.
Yes, sir.
Reagan was a great guy, and someone you wanted to be around, and he told me one time at Camp David that people want to look at you and say, I'd like to live next door to him. And he said, that's what I want to get across to people, so they'll listen to me.
And he did.